In the quiet, forgotten corners of America, justice isn't always blind. Sometimes it peeks under the blindfold, its gaze tainted by prejudice. This is the story of two men who wore a badge as a crown, and a woman they tried to crush beneath it. Officer Frank Kowalski and his partner thought they had an easy target, a black woman on a lonely road, someone whose voice would be silenced by the system they controlled. They dragged her through humiliation, cuffed her, and hauled her into a courtroom confident in their power. They were about to make the biggest mistake of their careers, because in a stunning twist of fate, the woman they tried to break was the one person who could bring their entire corrupt world crashing down with a single flash of gold and leather. The town of Oak Creek, Alabama, settled into the humid embrace of a Tuesday evening. Crickets chirped a lazy rhythm, and the setting sun bled orange and purple across the sky, painting the long, lonely stretch of Highway 72. It was on this highway that Dr. Anya Sharma drove her modest, late-model sedan. The windows were down, and the warm air, thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, filled the car. Anya was methodical, a creature of observation and precision. It was a trait that served her well in her profession. At 38, she had a quiet intensity, her eyes missing nothing. Tonight she was simply a woman driving home from a long consultation in a neighboring county, dressed in simple slacks and a silk blouse, her hair tied back in a neat bun. She was anonymous, and she preferred it that way. The sudden piercing glare of blue and red lights in her rearview mirror shattered the evening's tranquility. Her heart gave a familiar, weary thump. She glanced at her speedometer, exactly the speed limit. She checked her mirrors, signaled, and pulled over smoothly onto the gravel shoulder. She cut the engine, turned on her interior light, and placed her hands on the steering wheel at the 10 and 2 position. It was a practiced, de-escalating routine she had taught her younger nephews, a bitter necessity of modern life. Two officers emerged from the patrol car. The senior one, a man whose stocky frame strained the fabric of his uniform, approached the driver's side. His name tag read Kowalski. He was in his late 50s, with a florid face and a mustache that seemed to bristle with permanent irritation. The younger officer, Jensen, hung back by the passenger side, his hand resting self-consciously on his firearm. Officer Kowalski rapped his knuckles hard on the window, even though it was already halfway down. "License and registration." His voice was a gravelly bark, devoid of any preamble or courtesy. Anya calmly reached for her purse on the passenger seat. "Good evening, officer. May I ask why I was pulled over?" Kowalski's eyes narrowed. He shone his flashlight directly into her face, forcing her to squint. "You can start by giving me your license and registration. Now." She suppressed a sigh and retrieved the documents from her wallet and glove compartment, handing them out to the window. Kowalski snatched them. He studied her driver's license, his lip curling slightly. "Dr. Anya Sharma. A doctor, huh? What kind of doctor are you?" The question was laden with disbelief. "I have a doctorate in psychology, officer." "A shrink," he grunted, passing the documents to Jensen, who took them back to the patrol car. Kowalski leaned down his forearm, resting on the roof of her car, invading her space. "You got a broken taillight on the passenger side." Anya had done a walk-around of her rental car that morning. The taillight had been fine. "I'm certain it was working when I left this morning, officer. Perhaps the bulb just blew. Or perhaps you're just not as attentive as you think you are, doctor," he said, drawing out the title like an insult. He let his flashlight beam drift from her face, down her blouse, and into the car's interior. "Where you headed in such a hurry?" "I'm not in a hurry." "Officer, I'm heading back to my hotel." "Big city girl like you, what are you doing way out here in Oak Creek?" He pressed his tone, shifting from dismissive to accusatory. "I was visiting a client," she said, keeping her voice even. "Is there a problem?" "There's a problem if I say there is," Kowalski snapped. "We've had reports of suspicious activity in this area. People moving things they shouldn't be moving." He peered into her back seat, where a single briefcase sat. "What's in the bag?" "That's my briefcase, officer. It contains my work files." "You got a problem with me taking a look inside?" The question was a classic trap. "With all due respect, officer, unless you have a warrant or probable cause, I do not consent to a search of my personal property." Anya knew her rights, and her clear, unwavering assertion of them seemed to fan the flames of Kowalski's temper. A dark flush crept up his neck. To him, her calm refusal wasn't a citizen exercising a constitutional right. It was a black woman challenging his authority. "Probable cause," he sneered, a cruel smile twisting his lips. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Lady, your attitude is my probable cause." He straightened up and shouted to his partner, "Jensen, she's refusing a search. Looks like we got a nervous one here." Jensen returned from the car. "License is clean, Frank. No priors." Kowalski waved a dismissive hand. "Doesn't mean a thing. Step out of the vehicle, ma'am." Anya's stomach tightened, but her face remained a mask of composure. "Officer, I have not broken any law. You have my license. You have no reason to ask me to exit my vehicle." "I just gave you a reason." Kowalski's voice boomed across the quiet highway. "Now I'm not going to ask you again. Get out of the car." Anya knew this was a critical juncture. She could continue to refuse risking an illegal and violent extraction from the car, or she could comply and hope to fight this on legal ground later. Seeing the raw, irrational anger in Kowalski's eyes, she made a calculated decision. She slowly opened the door and stepped out, standing tall. The moment she was out, Kowalski was on her. "Turn around. Hands behind your back." "You are making a mistake, officer," she said, her voice low and steady. "Yeah. Well, you made a mistake coming through my town looking for trouble." He shoved her against the side of her car, the cold metal pressing against her cheek. He wrenched her arms behind her back with painful force, the metallic click of the handcuffs echoing in the night. While she was immobilized, Kowalski nodded to Jensen. "Search the vehicle, top to bottom." Jensen, who had looked uneasy throughout the exchange, hesitated for a second before complying. He started with the front seat, rummaging through her purse, then opening the briefcase she had explicitly forbidden them to search. "What are you looking for?" Anya asked, her voice strained against the pressure on her back. "Whatever people like you hide," Kowalski grunted into her ear. A few minutes later, Jensen emerged from the car, holding a small, unlabeled prescription bottle from the glove compartment. "Frank, look at this." Inside were a dozen small white pills. Anya's heart sank. It was her prescription medication for managing severe migraines, which she sometimes suffered from under extreme stress. She had transferred them from the bulky pharmacy bottle to a smaller, more convenient container for her trip. It was a careless, everyday act that in this context was about to become a weapon against her. Kowalski's eyes lit up with a malevolent glee. "Well, well, well. What do we have here? Unidentified pills in an unmarked bottle. Looks like we found our probable cause after all." "That is my prescribed medication," Anya stated, trying to keep the tremor out of her voice. "I can provide you with the prescription information. It's for migraines." "Save it for the judge, sweetheart," Kowalski sneered, tightening his grip and pushing her toward the patrol car. "Dr. Anya Sharma, you are under arrest for possession of a controlled substance and obstructing a police officer." as he shoved her into the back of the car, the hard plastic seat cold against her skin. Anya caught a final glimpse of her own car. Jensen was still inside, using a pocket knife to pry at the paneling of her door, searching for ghosts. Kowalski slammed the door shut, sealing her in darkness and the stench of stale cigarettes. The system was in motion and she was caught in its gears. But Officer Frank Kowalski had no idea what kind of machine he had just tried to break. The Oak Creek Police Department was a small, squat brick building that smelled of old coffee industrial cleaner and quiet desperation. As Anya was led through the back entrance, she noted every detail: the flickering fluorescent lights, the peeling paint on the cinder block walls, the bulletin board cluttered with faded flyers and mugshots. It was a study in institutional neglect. The booking process was a well-practiced degradation. Kowalski shoved her against a counter where a sallow-faced sergeant named Peters barely looked up from his crossword puzzle. They took her purse, her watch, her shoes. They photographed her the flash, a series of small, startling explosions in the dim room. They fingerprinted her, the black ink, a greasy, staining reminder of her new status as a criminal defendant. Throughout it all, Anya remained silent and observant. She was no longer just the victim of a wrongful arrest. She was a psychologist, a profiler in a live field study. She watched how the officers interacted, their casual contempt for procedure, their jocular camaraderie built on a shared sense of impunity. Kowalski paraded her past the few other officers on duty, a trophy of his night's work. "Caught this one out on 72, he announced loudly. "Big shot doctor from the city running pills. Gave me a real hard time, too." Anya met the curious or indifferent gazes of the other officers without flinching. She saw in their eyes not malice, but a profound and dangerous apathy. This was normal. This was Tuesday night. She was allowed one phone call. Kowalski stood over her arms crossed as she was handed the receiver. She could have called her boss, Section Chief David Harris, of the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit. One call to him, and this entire station would be swarming with federal agents within hours. The thought was tempting, a swift, satisfying stroke of power that would immediately end her ordeal. But she hesitated. Her finger hovered over the keypad. What was her real mission here? She hadn't come to Oak Creek by accident. For 6 months, the FBI had been receiving anonymous but credible tips about a pattern of civil rights abuses in this county. Reports of illegal traffic stops, shakedowns of minority-owned businesses, and evidence tampering, all pointing to a small, entrenched group of officers. Kowalski's name had appeared more than once. Her visit to the client was a cover. She was here on a preliminary reconnaissance mission to get a feel for the town and its power dynamics before the Bureau decided whether to launch a full-scale undercover operation. She was meant to observe from the outside. But now Officer Kowalski had unwittingly given her the ultimate inside look. He had dragged her directly into the system she was meant to investigate. If she revealed her identity now, the shield would go up, records would be scrubbed, stories would be synchronized, and the corruption would burrow deeper underground, making it impossible to root out. They would apologize profusely, call it a misunderstanding, and she would walk out. But the truth would walk out with her buried forever. No. This was an opportunity. A painful, humiliating, and dangerous opportunity, but an opportunity nonetheless. She would see this through. She would let the system she was investigating try to devour her, and she would document every single bite. She dialed a different number. It belonged to a local attorney, a man named Samuel Page, a retired public defender, whom the Bureau kept on a short list for sensitive situations. He was old sharp, and most importantly, not part of the local good old boy network. Page, a gruff voice answered. Mr. Page, my name is Anya Sharma. I have been given your number as a legal referral. I have been wrongfully arrested in Oak Creek. I need representation. There was a pause. Oak Creek, son, you've kicked a real hornet's nest. What are the charges? Possession and obstruction. Who was the arresting officer? An Officer Kowalski. A deep sigh came down the line. Frank Kowalski, of course. All right, Miss Sharma. Don't say another word to anyone. Not a single word. I'll be there in the morning for your arraignment. Sit tight. And I mean it. Say nothing. The line went dead. Anya handed the phone back. Calling your lawyer. Kowalski sneered. Good luck. Around here, the blue line is a hell of a lot stronger than any shyster you can afford. They led her to a holding cell. It was cold, bare, and smelled faintly of vomit. A single metal slab served as a bed. The toilet in the corner had no seat. As the heavy steel door clanged shut, the sound of the lock turning felt unnervously final. The bravado she had maintained began to crack at the edges, replaced by a chilling sense of vulnerability. She was alone, stripped of her identity, at the mercy of the very men she was supposed to bring to justice. She sat on the edge of the metal slab, the cold seeping through her slacks. She closed her eyes and forced her breathing to slow, pushing back the tide of fear and anger. This was no longer just about her. It was about every person who had been in this cell. Every person who didn't have a badge to flash or a section chief to call. It was about the anonymous tips, the whispers of injustice that had brought her to this town. Kowalski had called her a shrink. He had no idea how right he was. He and his department were now under the most intense psychological evaluation of their lives. They just didn't know it yet. And Anya Sharma, sitting in the dark, began to meticulously build her profile of the corruption that festered in the heart of Oak Creek. Assistant District Attorney Robert Patterson considered himself a shark in a small pond. Young, ambitious, with a sharp suit and a sharper haircut, he viewed the Oak Creek caseload as a stepping stone. His goal was the DA's office in a major city, and the path to get there was paved with convictions. Lots of them. He didn't have time for nuance. He had time for wins. The Sharma file landed on his desk Wednesday morning with a thud. He scanned Kowalski's report with practiced efficiency. Black female out-of-town plates stopped on Highway 72. Broken taillight. Uncooperative attitude. Resisted a search. Unmarked bottle of pills. It was a classic open and shut case. Patterson had prosecuted a dozen just like it. They were easy plea bargains. The defendants were usually poor, scared, and just wanted to go home. They'd plead down to a lesser charge, pay a fine, and he'd add another W to his record. What do you think, Rob? Kowalski asked, leaning against the doorframe of Patterson's office. He had come in early to make sure the paperwork was straight. In reality, he wanted to personally guide the narrative. Patterson tossed the file onto his desk. Looks solid, Frank. Another public menace off your streets. He grinned. She give you much trouble. A real piece of work, Kowalski said, shaking his head with theatrical gravity. Mouthy. One of those educated types who thinks she's better than everyone. Thinks knowing a few big words means the law doesn't apply to her. I knew she was hiding something the second I laid eyes on her. Patterson nodded, half listening. He was already drafting the plea offer in his head. The pills are at the lab, I assume. Yeah, but that's just a formality. Look, the real charge here is the obstruction, the resisting. I want to make that one stick, Rob. We need to send a message that you don't come into our town and disrespect law enforcement. This was the part of the job Patterson privately disdained but publicly encouraged. The cops needed to feel like the DA's office was their sword and shield. It kept the machine running smoothly. "Don't you worry, Frank. We'll make an example of her. She'll be begging for a plea by the time I'm done with her initial statement." But the first crack in his confidence appeared when Anya Sharma's lawyer arrived. He had expected some overworked, fresh-out-of-law school public defender. Instead, Samuel Page walked in. Page was a legend in the state's legal circles, a retired lion of the defense bar, who now only took cases that genuinely interested or outraged him. He was in his 70s, with a shock of white hair and eyes that had seen everything. He didn't work for free. "Robert," Page said, his voice a dry rasp as he met the ADA in the hallway. "I'm representing Dr. Sharma. My client will not be making any statement. She will be pleading not guilty to all charges. We demand a speedy trial." Patterson was taken aback. "Sam, what are you doing slumming it out in Oak Creek? This is a simple possession and obstruction. I can offer your client a deal that makes this all go away. Time served, a small fine. She can be on her way home by lunch." Page gave a thin, humorless smile. "My client isn't interested in deals for crimes she did not commit. The pills are prescription medication, as you'll find out when the lab report eventually comes back. And the obstruction charge is a fabrication to cover for an illegal stop and search. We'll see you in court." Patterson watched the old lawyer walk away, a knot of unease tightening in his stomach. Why would Samuel Page drive 2 hours for a case like this? And who was this Dr. Sharma who could afford him? He pulled up her file again. The address on her license was in a very affluent part of Washington, D.C. He ran a cursory background check, but it came back strangely sparse. No criminal record, of course, but also very little public footprint. It was clean. Too clean. He pushed the unease aside. It didn't matter. The case was built on the sworn testimony of 2 police officers, a decorated veteran like Frank Kowalski and his partner against some out-of-towner, in an Oak Creek courtroom that was a slam dunk. Page was just posturing. The arraignment was brief. Anya, now in an ill-fitting orange jumpsuit, stood beside Samuel Page. She looked tired, but composed, her gaze steady. She pleaded not guilty in a clear, firm voice. Judge Alistair Finch, a stern but fair man who had presided over the county court for 30 years, set a trial date for the following week. It was an unusually fast turnaround, a courtesy he extended to Page. In the days leading up to the trial, Patterson prepped his star witness. He sat with Kowalski and Jensen in a small conference room going over their testimony. "Just stick to the report," Patterson instructed. "She was acting suspiciously. You feared for your safety. Her refusal to consent to a search heightened your suspicion. Then you saw the pills in plain view. Simple." "That's not exactly how it happened," Jensen mumbled, staring at the table. "The pills were in the glove compartment. I only found them after I started searching." Kowalski shot him a venomous glare. "The lid was ajar. They were visible. We've been over this, Dale. Your memory is getting fuzzy. It was a high-stress situation." Jensen flinched and fell silent. Patterson pretended not to notice the exchange. This was another part of the job, not asking questions you didn't want the answers to. A cop's fuzzy memory was often the glue that held a weak case together. "Jensen is right on one thing. It was a high-stress situation," Patterson said smoothly, directing his words at Kowalski. "And the defendant's aggressive and non-compliant behavior is what created that stress. That's the key. We need the jury to see her through your eyes. A potential threat, not a victim." Kowalski nodded eagerly. He was a good witness in that he was utterly convinced of his own righteousness. He would be believable on the stand. Patterson was confident. He had 2 officers' physical evidence. The pills which the lab had confirmed were a non-narcotic prescription drug, but that was a detail he could obscure, and a defendant who had, by all accounts, a bad attitude. He would paint a picture of an arrogant outsider who thought she was above the law, who put brave officers at risk. He was building a case against a caricature, a phantom he had constructed from a police report and his own ambition. He had no idea that all the while the real Dr. Anya Sharma was watching, analyzing, and waiting for the moment when the phantom would disappear, leaving him face to face with the truth. The Oak Creek County Courthouse was an old, solemn building, its wooden pews worn smooth by a century of human drama. The air was thick with the smell of floor polish and anxiety. On the day of the trial, the gallery was sparsely populated. A few locals who treated court proceedings as entertainment, and a handful of off-duty cops who had come to support Kowalski. Anya sat at the defense table next to Samuel Page. She was dressed in the same slacks and blouse she had been arrested in, now cleaned and pressed. She looked less like a criminal defendant and more like a visiting lecturer. Her composure was unnerving. She surveyed the room, her eyes lingering on the jury, then on Judge Finch, and finally on Robert Patterson, who was shuffling his notes with a confident air. Patterson began his opening statement by painting a heroic picture of Officers Kowalski and Jensen, 2 guardians of the peace patrolling the dark highways to protect the citizens of this county. He then described Anya as a woman shrouded in suspicion whose aggressive defiance during a routine traffic stop gave these brave officers every reason to fear for their safety. When he called his first witness, Officer Frank Kowalski took the stand. He walked with a swagger, his uniform crisp, his expression grave. He looked the jury in the eye and delivered a masterclass in performative testimony. Patterson led him through the events of the night, and Kowalski recounted his version with practiced ease. "She had this look in her eye, you know," Kowalski said, his voice resonating with sincerity. "Hostile. I've been a cop for 30 years. You learn to read people. I knew she was trouble." He described how Anya had refused a lawful order to exit the vehicle, how she had argued belligerently about her rights. When Patterson asked about the search, Kowalski lied smoothly. "As I approached the vehicle to question her further about her suspicious behavior, I saw in plain view on her passenger seat an unlabeled bottle of pills. Given the narcotics trafficking we've seen on that highway, my training immediately told me this was a major red flag." At the defense table, Page made a note on his legal pad, but didn't object. He let Kowalski build his own scaffold. Kowalski's testimony was damning. He was credible, confident, and played the part of the seasoned, street-smart cop perfectly. The jury, a panel of 6 local citizens, seemed to hang on his every word. Anya watched them, her expression unreadable. Next, Officer Jensen took the stand. He was visibly nervous, his eyes darting between Patterson Kowalski and the floor. He corroborated Kowalski's story, but his delivery was flat. His answers clipped. He recited the facts from the police report like a child reciting a memorized poem without conviction. Then it was Samuel Page's turn to cross-examine. He approached Jensen with a grandfatherly air. "Officer Jensen," Page began gently, "you have a family, don't you? A wife? 2 young children?" Jensen looked surprised. Yes, sir." "And you consider yourself an honorable man?" "Yes, sir." Patterson stood. "Objection, Your Honor. Relevance," I'll allow it. Get to the point, Mr. Page. Judge Finch said, his eyes fixed on Jensen. Page's tone sharpened slightly. Officer, you testified that you saw the bottle of pills in plain view on the passenger seat. Is that correct? Jensen swallowed. He glanced at Kowalski, who gave him a barely perceptible nod. Yes, sir. But the defendant's purse and a closed briefcase were on the passenger seat, were they not? I believe so. So where exactly was this bottle, perched on top of the briefcase? It must have been, Jensen stammered. Page took a step closer. Officer Jensen, isn't it true that you only found the bottle after you had opened the glove compartment in direct violation of my client's Fourth Amendment rights because your senior officer, Officer Kowalski, ordered you to conduct an illegal search? The question hung in the air. Jensen's face went pale. He looked at Kowalski, then at Patterson, then back at Page. The silence stretched. The entire courtroom seemed to be holding its breath. I don't recall, he finally whispered. You don't recall? Page's voice was like ice. You are under oath, son, an oath you took before God and this court. I will ask you one more time. Did you find that bottle in the glove compartment? Jensen crumbled. His shoulders slumped, and he looked at his hands. Yes, he said, his voice barely audible. It was in the glove compartment. A collective gasp went through the courtroom. Patterson shot to his feet, his face a mask of fury and panic. Objection, counsel is badgering the witness. Objection overruled. Judge Finch boomed, his gaze burning a hole into Jensen. The witness will answer the question. Page had drawn first blood, and it was a fatal wound to the prosecution's case. He had no further questions. A shaken Jensen scurried from the witness stand, avoiding Kowalski's murderous stare. The prosecution rested its case on that sour note. Patterson's confidence had evaporated, replaced by a desperate, sweaty sheen. The defense calls its only witness, Page announced. Dr. Anya Sharma. Anya walked to the stand with a calm, deliberate stride. She took the oath, her voice clear and steady. Page began his questioning. Dr. Sharma, would you please state your full name and occupation for the court? My name is Dr. Anya Sharma. I am a forensic psychologist. And by whom are you employed, Dr. Sharma? Anya turned her gaze from Page to Judge Finch. I am a special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, assigned to the Behavioral Analysis Unit at Quantico. The silence in the courtroom was absolute, a sudden vacuum of sound. Patterson's jaw dropped. The jury members stared wide-eyed. The off-duty cops in the gallery shifted uncomfortably. Officer Kowalski's ruddy face turned a sickly shade of grey. Anya reached into her jacket pocket. Your Honor, she said, her voice ringing with authority. May I approach the bench to present my credentials? Judge Finch, looking utterly stunned, could only nod. You may. The defense calls its only witness, Samuel Page announced, his voice steady and clear, cutting through the tense atmosphere of the courtroom. Dr. Anya Sharma. A murmur went through the gallery. All eyes turned to the defense table. Officer Kowalski shifted in his seat, a smug, contemptuous smirk playing on his lips. He saw a cornered defendant about to offer a desperate, flimsy story. ADA Patterson straightened his tie. A confident predator, ready to tear apart any testimony she might give. He believed this was the final act before a swift conviction. Both men were catastrophically wrong. Anya rose with a fluid, deliberate grace that commanded attention. There was no fear in her posture, no hint of the victim. She walked to the witness stand, not as the accused, but as an expert taking a lectern. Her footsteps were measured, her expression calm and analytical. She met the curious gaze of the jury, the stern eyes of Judge Finch, and the arrogant stare of Robert Patterson, with the same unnerving equanimity. She took the oath, her voice resonant and firm. "I do." Samuel Page began his approach deceptively gentle. "Dr. Sharma, would you please state your full name and educational background for the court?" "My name is Dr. Anya Sharma. I hold a bachelor's degree in sociology from Yale University and a doctorate in forensic psychology from the University of Virginia." The pedigree was impressive. A few jurors exchanged surprised glances. Patterson's confident smirk wavered slightly. This was not the uneducated troublemaker Kowalski's report had painted. "And Dr. Sharma," Page continued, letting the weight of her credentials settle in the room. "What does your professional work generally entail?" Anya turned her head slightly, addressing the jury directly. "My work involves the analytical study of human behavior, specifically within the context of criminal activity. I specialize in profiling threat assessment and understanding the methodologies of criminal organizations." The irony was so thick, it was almost suffocating. Kowalski's face began to lose its color. He was starting to feel a cold dread creep up his spine. This woman wasn't just educated. Her entire career was about analyzing people exactly like him. Page paused, letting the implication hang in the air before delivering the final devastating blow. "And by whom are you employed in this capacity, Dr. Sharma?" Anya's gaze shifted from the jury and locked directly onto Judge Finch. Her voice when she spoke was not loud, but it filled every corner of the silent courtroom with its absolute authority. "I am a special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation assigned to the Behavioral Analysis Unit at the FBI National Academy in Quantico, Virginia." The reaction was instantaneous and seismic. A collective gasp swept through the room. The court reporter's fingers froze over her stenotype machine. The jury members stared, mouths agape, looking from Anya to a suddenly pale Kowalski. Patterson's pen clattered from his numb fingers onto the table. Kowalski's face, which had gone from red to white, now seemed to turn a sickly shade of green. The smugness had evaporated, replaced by the stark, abject terror of a man who realized he had pointed his weapon at the sun. Before the chaos could fully erupt, Anya spoke again, her voice cutting through the stunned silence. "Your Honor," she said, addressing Judge Finch with professional courtesy, "may I approach the bench to present my official credentials?" Judge Alistair Finch, a man rarely surprised by anything after 30 years on the bench, looked as though he had been struck by lightning. He stared at Anya, then down at the prosecution table, a storm of comprehension and fury gathering in his eyes. He gave a short, sharp nod. "You may, Special Agent." He had called her Special Agent. The word echoed like a death knell for the prosecution. Anya stepped down from the witness box. The entire courtroom watched her mesmerized. She moved with purpose, retrieving a slim black leather wallet from her jacket pocket. She walked to the judge's bench, the click of her heels the only sound in the tomb-like silence. She opened the wallet and placed it on the bench before Judge Finch. Inside, the judge saw a gleaming, heavy gold shield of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Beside it, her official identification card sat in a recessed slot, bearing her photograph, her name, and her title. Judge Finch picked up the credentials, examining them closely. He looked from the serious professional woman in the photograph to the equally serious professional woman standing before him. He put the credentials down, his knuckles white. He took a deep, steadying breath. But when he spoke, his voice was a low, dangerous tremor that promised an earthquake. "Mr. Patterson." He began, his gaze fixing on the assistant district attorney. "Get on your feet." Patterson staggered up, looking as if he might be sick. "Mr. Patterson, are you telling me that you brought this case to trial, that you, an officer of this court, sought to prosecute a federal agent on the flimsy, contradictory, and now clearly perjured testimony of these two officers?" The judge's voice began to rise. "Did you conduct even a shred of due diligence? Did you question the gaping holes in Officer Kowalski's report? Or were you so blinded by your ambition, so eager to add another win to your tally, that you failed in the most basic duty of your office to seek the truth? Your Honor, I was presented with a report. I had no idea." Patterson stammered his defense, pathetic and weak. "You had no idea because you did not care to know." Judge Finch roared, his voice, now a physical force in the room. He slammed his hand on the bench. "You have wasted this court's time. You have maliciously prosecuted a citizen, a decorated federal officer, and you have made a mockery of the justice system you swore to serve." He then swiveled his head, and the full, terrifying force of his wrath fell upon Frank Kowalski. "Officer Kowalski, stand up." Kowalski pushed himself to his feet, his body trembling. He looked like a cornered animal. "You took an oath, sir," the judge thundered, pointing a shaking finger at him. "An oath to protect and serve, to uphold the Constitution of the United States. And you used your badge to harass, to intimidate, and to lie. You lied on a police report. You lied to the district attorney's office. And you stood in this witness box under oath to God. And you lied to my face. You have brought shame and disgrace upon your uniform, your department, and this entire county." Judge Finch grabbed his gavel. His face a mask of righteous fury. He raised it high. Bam! The sound cracked through the courtroom. "This case is dismissed with extreme prejudice." Bam! "I am issuing a court order for the immediate arrest of Officer Frank Kowalski and Officer Dale Jensen on charges of felony perjury, filing a false police report, and conspiracy to violate a citizen's civil rights." Bam! "Bailiff, take these two men into custody, now." The bailiff, looking shocked, moved hesitantly toward Kowalski, who simply stared into the abyss of his own making as the cold steel handcuffs were locked around his wrists. Judge Finch's final glare was for Patterson. "Mr. Patterson, I am filing a formal complaint for gross prosecutorial misconduct with the state bar this afternoon. I suggest you find a new line of work. You are a disgrace. Now get out of my courtroom." Patterson, utterly broken, gathered his things with shaking hands and all but ran a man, fleeing the smoldering ruins of his own career. Throughout the cataclysm, Anya had returned to the defense table and stood silently beside Samuel Page. She felt no thrill of victory or joy in the destruction she had witnessed. She felt only a grim satisfaction. This was not vengeance. This was a consequence, a predictable outcome, a necessary surgical amputation to save the body from a festering disease. The system she had sworn to uphold had for a moment turned on her. Now she had turned it back on itself, and its gears were beginning to grind with a terrible righteous fury. The sound of Judge Finch's gavel was not an end, but a beginning. In the seconds that followed its thunderous crack, the Oak Creek County Courthouse devolved into a state of managed pandemonium. Reporters who had initially attended the trial, expecting a mundane local story, now scrambled over each other. their fingers flying across their phone screens, broadcasting the explosive news. The off-duty officers who had come to show solidarity for their colleague now looked at each other with a mixture of horror and dawning self-preservation. Their protective blue wall had not just been breached, it had been demolished by a single, perfectly aimed wrecking ball. Frank Kowalski stood frozen, his face a grotesque canvas of disbelief. The cold metallic click of the bailiff's handcuffs, locking around his wrists, seemed to finally rouse him. "You can't do this," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "I'm a police officer." The bailiff, a man who had known Kowalski for 2 decades, didn't meet his eyes. "You heard the judge, Frank. You're under arrest." It was a quiet, perfunctory statement that signaled the absolute end of Kowalski's reign. As he was led away, his swagger gone replaced by a shambling, defeated gait, he looked at Anya. In his eyes, she saw no remorse, only a raw, burning hatred, the fury of a king dethroned by a person he never even considered a player in his game. Anya remained standing by the witness box, a pillar of calm in the swirling chaos. She watched as a weeping Dale Jensen was also taken into custody, his youthful arrogance shattered into a million pieces of pathetic fear. She saw Robert Patterson, the shark of the small pond, scuttling out of the courtroom like a bottom feeder, his face the color of spoiled milk. Her gaze was analytical, her mind processing the data, the final reactions of a system collapsing under the weight of its own corruption. Samuel Page approached her, his old eyes gleaming with a fierce, vindicated light. "Well, Special Agent," he said, his voice low, "I must admit, that was the most dramatic conclusion to a case I've seen in 50 years of practicing law." Before Anya could respond, the main doors of the courtroom opened. The chaos hushed for a moment as several figures in dark suits entered with an unmistakable air of federal authority. Leading them was a tall, imposing man in his late 50s with graying temples and the weary, resolute eyes of someone who had seen too much. This was Section Chief David Harris, head of the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit. He walked directly to Anya, his team fanning out to secure the scene. "Agent Sharma," he said, his voice a low rumble that cut through the remaining buzz in the room. "I got your lawyer's message. For 12 hours you were dark. No check-in, no contact. I was about to send a search party. Instead, it seems you've kicked over the entire anthill." "It was a dynamic situation, sir," Anya replied, a flicker of a smile touching her lips for the first time. "I made a judgment call that full immersion would yield the most comprehensive data." Harris shook his head, though a hint of admiration glinted in his eyes. "Full immersion. Anya, you got yourself arrested and thrown in a cell by the very subjects of a potential RICO investigation. That's not in the manual." "They presented me with an opportunity I couldn't refuse, Chief," she countered. "I now have first-hand intelligence on their illegal stop-and-search tactics, their methods of intimidation, their booking procedure, and the utter lack of oversight from the command structure. I was the evidence. They documented their own crimes for me." Harris absorbed this, his expression shifting from concern to grim determination. He turned to one of his agents, a younger man with a tablet. "Davies, get teams mobilized. I want search warrants for the Oak Creek PD, building the homes of Kowalski and Chief Carmichael, and a seizure order for every server computer and paper file in that station. The warrant from Judge Finch gives us local authority, but I just got off the phone with the U.S. Attorney. A federal warrant is on its way. We're taking this entire operation over, now." The arrival of the federal convoy transformed the town square. Sleek black SUVs without license plates pulled up in front of the squat police department, disgorging 24 agents in tactical vests emblazoned with 3 bold yellow letters FBI. The remaining local officers on duty watched in stunned silence as the federal agents entered their building not as guests, but as conquerors. The raid was a model of cold efficiency. Agents swarmed the building, their movements precise and coordinated. They moved through those halls that Kowalski had once patrolled like a personal fiefdom, their professionalism a stark contrast to the station's grimy, neglected atmosphere. In the evidence locker, they found dozens of improperly logged items and bags of evidence from questionable arrests that had never been sent to the lab. In the IT room, Agent Davies and his team began cloning hard drives, their software digging for deleted emails and hidden files. Section Chief Harris, with Anya by his side, walked directly to the office of Police Chief Bill Carmichael. Carmichael, a portly man with a perpetually flushed face, was on the phone, trying and failing to get answers. He stood up as they entered, his expression a mix of bluster and fear. "What in the hell is the meaning of this, Harris?" he demanded, trying to project authority he no longer had. "You can't just come into my department and—" Harris cut him off, dropping a thick legal document on his desk. "This is a federal warrant, Chief. It means I can and I am. Your officer Frank Kowalski illegally arrested a federal agent. In doing so, he has blown open a conspiracy of corruption, extortion, and civil rights abuses that has been festering under your command for years." "Frank is a good cop," Carmichael sputtered. "This is a misunderstanding. The woman was—" "The woman," Anya interrupted, her voice, quiet but cutting, "is the lead analyst on an FBI investigation into your department that has been active for 6 months. An investigation you are now the primary subject of, Chief. We have credible allegations that Officer Kowalski has been extorting money from local business owners, a crime he was likely trying to cover up when he decided to harass me on a lonely highway." The color drained from Carmichael's face. He sank into his chair, the bluster gone, replaced by the slack-jawed terror of a man seeing the gallows being built just for him. The nail in the coffin was Dale Jensen. In a sterile interrogation room at the FBI's temporary command post, he broke completely. With Harris leading the questioning and Anya observing from behind one-way glass, Jensen confessed everything. He was terrified, guilt-ridden, and desperate to trade his testimony for a lighter sentence. "It was Frank," he sobbed, his head in his hands. "He did it all. He called it collecting a tax. He had a list of businesses mostly run by immigrants, people he knew wouldn't fight back, like the Castillos who own the grocery on Elm Street. Frank would go there every Friday. He'd find some fake health code violation, threaten to shut them down. Mr. Castillo would give him cash $200 every week just to be left alone." Anya watched her face impassive, but her mind was racing. This was it. The direct testimony linking Kowalski to the RICO predicates. Jensen's confession was the key that unlocked everything. He went on to detail how Kowalski would boast about fabricating reports, how he taught younger officers to create probable cause out of thin air, and how Chief Carmichael knew about all of it, dismissing any complaints as sour grapes from criminals. The legal hammer fell with swift and brutal force. Frank Kowalski was denied bail and faced a federal indictment with over 30 counts, including racketeering charges that carried a mandatory minimum sentence of 20 years. At his arraignment, he looked like a ghost, his former colleagues and friends nowhere to be seen, leaving him utterly alone to face the consequences of his reign. Robert Patterson was not only disbarred, but also faced a state investigation for his role in numerous wrongful convictions. A review board, prompted by the public outcry, began reinvestigating every case he had prosecuted that relied solely on Kowalski's testimony, leading to 3 overturned convictions within 6 months. His dream of being a big city DA ended in permanent disgrace. Chief Bill Carmichael was indicted for obstruction of justice and misprision of a felony. The federal investigation proved he had actively suppressed at least 4 internal complaints filed against Kowalski, burying them to protect his star officer and avoid scrutiny of his department. The Oak Creek Police Department itself was subjected to a sweeping federal consent decree. The Department of Justice took over the hiring, training, and policy-making for the foreseeable future. New protocols for traffic stops, use of force, and evidence handling were implemented. A civilian oversight committee was established, giving the citizens of Oak Creek, the very people Kowalski had terrorized, a voice in how their community was policed for the first time. A month later, Anya met Samuel Page on a park bench overlooking a small pond in the center of town. The national news crews were gone, and a fragile sense of normalcy was returning. "The U.S. Attorney's Office sent this," Page said, handing her a check. "It's the settlement from your wrongful arrest lawsuit against the county. They didn't even put up a fight." Anya looked at the check for a substantial amount. "Please donate it all to the state's Public Defender Fund," she said without hesitation, "and to Mr. Castillo's legal fund. He's suing the county, I hear." "He is," Page said with a smile, "and he has a very good chance of winning. You know you tore this town down to its foundations, Special Agent." "It needed to be done," Anya said, watching a group of children playing nearby. "The foundation was rotten. Sometimes the only way to heal a wound is to cut out the infection completely, no matter how painful it is. Kowalski wasn't the disease. He was just the most visible symptom. The disease was impunity." She thought back to the cold, dark cell, the feeling of utter powerlessness. She had embraced that feeling, used it as a lens to see the system from the bottom up. Her personal ordeal had been transformed into a tool, a weapon not of revenge, but of restoration. The karma that had hit Frank Kowalski and his enablers wasn't some mystical force. It was the direct, calculated, and relentless application of the very law they thought they were above. Justice hadn't just been served, it had been surgically excised from the heart of the corruption and transplanted back into the community it was meant to protect. This story serves as a powerful reminder that the shield of authority is not a license for prejudice, and true justice demands accountability from everyone, regardless of the uniform they wear. Dr. Anya Sharma's ordeal wasn't just about one woman's strength against a corrupt system. It's a testament to the idea that the truth, no matter how deeply buried, has a way of coming to light, often in the most dramatic fashion possible. The actions of Officers Kowalski and Patterson show how easily power can corrupt. But Anya's calculated courage proves that one person standing firm in their integrity can indeed topple an empire built on lies. If this story of karma and ultimate justice resonated with you, please smash that like button and share it with someone who needs to see it. Don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss our next story of real-life drama and consequences. Let us know in the comments what you think about this incredible turn of events.